Today we commence the 8th chapter of Hornbill, Silk Road by Nick Middleton. A very beautiful story, as always. This time it is going to take us towards Mount Kailash. So let's watch all the adventures throughout the journey. Before that, let's know a little about the author. Nick Middleton is an award-winning geographer, writer, TV presenter, environmental scientist, and university lecturer. He is the author of 7 travel books, including the bestseller Going to Extremes, which accompanied a television series he wrote and presented for Channel 4 and the National Geographic Channel on extreme environments and people who live in them. You can imagine the author is so adventurous, what an explorer. You can imagine what he must have penned down. I'm sure it's going to be great fun. Let's go through the plot to know about it. Silk Road gives an account of a journey from gently rolling hills of Ravu to Mount Kailash. The narrator wanted to complete the Kora at Mount Kailash. What do you mean by Kora? You know, we all go to temples. Most of us as Hindus, whenever we go to places of pilgrimage, we go to temples, you know, we go round the deity or you go round the temple. Yes, that's a Kora. That's called a Kora. It's basically even a Buddhist ritual sort of thing where people do that. You know, they go round it. So he wanted to complete the Kora at Mount Kailash. Now that was what he wanted to do. Lamo gave him a long-sleeved sheepskin coat to keep him warmer. He hired Sitan's car and took Daniel as companion for escorting him up to Darchen. He seems a lover of adventure who is not at all afraid of taking risks. Now this line you will definitely get to know. It will be more justified when you go through the chapter line by line, word by word, and just imagine the risk he has taken and with how much ease he gets through them. A flawless half moon floated in a perfect blue sky on the morning we said our goodbyes. Now here began their journey. Here began their journey towards Mount Kailash, and it was early in the morning. It was a flawless half moon which floated in a perfect blue sky on the morning we said our goodbyes. Extended banks of cloud like long French loaves glowed pink as the sun emerged to splash the distant mountain tops with a rose-tinted blush. Now, such a beautiful scenery. I mean, you're nearly on the mountain top sort of thing. Such a beautiful scenery. So what he says was extended banks of cloud, as in, you know, it was all different types of clouds in the sky to what he finds it. I mean, if you look at the shapes in the sky of, you know, the clouds, you find them all different shapes. Sometimes you feel it's like a bird, sometimes you feel it's like an animal, right? So what he felt were like the French loaves. Now, what are French loaves? That's a bread that is shaped and you know, this baked in one piece, a French loaf. You have something like a a baguette, they call it in French. So that's a French loaf. So he felt they are all in those shapes. It glowed pink as the sun emerged. The sun emerged to splash the distant mountain tops with a rose-tinted blush. It was literally pink. It was like a rosy picture. The sun was just emerging, so it was really nice. The sun emerging and the blue sky with a rose-tinted blush. Now that we were leaving Ravu, Lamo said she wanted to give me a farewell present. Now as they were about to, you know, they were leaving Ravu, they were heading towards the Mount Kailash. Lamo wanted to give him a nice farewell gift. And what was that? One evening, I told her through Daniel that I was heading towards Mount Kailash to complete the Kora, and she'd said that I ought to get some warmer clothes. One evening, now through Daniel, he had told, you know, he had sent a word to her telling her that, you know what, I am traveling to Mount Kailash, and she felt, now if you are going to Mount Kailash, you need real warm clothes, right? You ought to get some warmer, still warmer clothes. After ducking back into her ton, after she went in, back into her ton, ducking is basically going inside and then coming out. She emerged carrying one of the long-sleeved sheepskin coats that all the men wore. Now, obviously, he was not staying there. He had been there. So, she brought him a nice long-sleeved sheepskin coat. It was made out of sheepskin. That keeps you really warm, that all the men wore. Sitan sized me up. He looked at me attentively. Sized me up. He looked at me as we clambered into his car. Clambered as in we moved awkwardly into his car. Oh, yes, he declared. Drogba, sir. Drogba means shepherd. And why did he call him a shepherd? Remember, he was wearing a sheepskin coat. So he resembled a shepherd. So that's why he called him a Drogba, which is a shepherd. We took a shortcut to get off the Shangtang. There was a shortcut there because Sitan was, he was a resident of that place. He knew all the ways. So he took a shortcut. Sitan knew a route that would take us southwest, almost directly towards Mount Kailash. He knew some good shortcut. It involved crossing several fairly high mountain passes, he said. He said there are many high mountain passes, but then that's okay. But no problem, sir, he assured us, if there is no snow. He says, if there is no snow, there will be no problem. So he asks him, what was the likelihood of that, I asked. Now the narrator, he's asking him, he says, okay, so how do you know that there will be snow or not? What is the possibility? And he says, not knowing, sir, until we get there. Until we get there, we will never know. I cannot predict right from here whether there will be snow or not. Once we get to that place, we will definitely know. So, from the gently rolling hills of Ravu, the shortcut took us across vast open plains with nothing in them. There was absolutely nothing in them except a few gazelles that would look up from nibbling the arid pastures and frown before bounding away into the void. Now, while they were going, they saw nothing but open land, vast plains. And what they saw, a few gazelles. You see, these are these gazelles, these antelopes with a, curved horn. Yeah, these are the gazelles. Now, they were actually nibbling, they were eating. You can see, they were nibbling the arid pastures. Arid pastures are basically that dry land which has maybe no rain at all, and it is something covered with grass. So, it is just lying there. So, they were nibbling the grass over there, and they would frown before bouncing away, before jumping away into the void, into the empty space. So, as they would drive from there, these gazelles would really move away. Further on, where the plains became more stony than grassy, now gradually the grass disappeared and the route became a little stony. A great herd of wild ass came into view. After seeing the gazelles, then they come across the wild ass over there. There was a great herd, as in a large group of them. They came into view, we could see them. Sitan told us we were approaching them long before they appeared. Before we could see them, Sitan told us, okay, now you all have seen gazelles, the next you all will be seeing wild ass. So he had told us before only. Kyang, he said, pointing towards a far off pall of dust. What do you mean by Kyang? This is the wild ass of Tibet. Right? Now here we see something pointing towards a far off pall of dust. Pall of dust is in, this thick smoke when the animals run on those plains. You can see this dark cloudy smoke. So when we drew near them, I could see the herd galloping en masse. Galloping as in they were literally running fast. En masse is in a group. They were running together. All of them, wheeling and turning in tight formation as if they were practicing maneuvers on some predetermined course. Now, the way they were moving, the fashion in which they were, wheeling, they were turning, it was like a tight formation as though what? They were practicing maneuvers as in movement requiring skill. They were doing some fancy movements on some predetermined course. There's some like a military training types, those types, some course which was there, they were working on that. Plumes of dust billowed into the crisp clean air. So while they were doing those different movements, the different fancy movement, plumes as in long cloud of smoke or vapor. So while they were doing that, the dust was flying down, right? Billowed into as in moved or flowed outward. So that was moving out into the crisp, clean air. You can see it over there. The view is something similar. Yeah, this is what it was. That was the next view they had. Now, as the hills started to push up once more from the rocky wilderness, we passed solitary drogbas tending their flocks. Now, the next view that they came across, the next scene that they came across was they could see solitary drogbas, solitary as in private shepherds. You know, drogbas are the shepherds. They could see those tending their flocks as in looking after their flocks. They have a lot of domestic animals. So they were looking after them. Sometimes men, sometimes women, these well-wrapped figures would pause and stare at our car, occasionally waving as we passed. Now they were all different. Sometimes they were men, sometimes they were women, and they were, see if you can see how they are dressed up. Well-wrapped figures. They were very well wrapped. It was cold out there, so obviously. And they would pass and stare at our car. You know, it was a very rare thing that someone really goes there. So whoever goes there, they welcome, you know, very warm-heartedly with a smile, or they wave you goodbye. So occasionally waving as we passed. When the track took us close to their animals, the track as in that rough path or the road, when it took us close to their animals, the sheep would take evasive action as a dodging action. They would wonder now where the car is coming, veering away from the speeding vehicle. Veering as in changing the direction. Suddenly they would move away from the vehicle. Obviously they would be scared, right? So they would move away into another direction. This is how, these are the different, he came across these different segments as they were going through that journey. These are all the different animals, the people, whatever they came across throughout their journey. Now, we passed nomads' dark tents pitched in splendid isolation, usually with a huge black dog, a Tibetan Mastiff, standing guard. Now next what they passed was, they passed the dark tents where the nomads were there. Nomads are who? They are people who travel from place to place to find fresh pasture, and they have no permanent homes, right? So they were the one, they came across their dark tents. Now these tents, they were guarded by a huge black dog. It's a Tibetan Mastiff standing guard. They use these black dogs, you know. It's a long, strong breed of dogs, really big one with drooping ears, you know. They have this dog as guards over there. These beasts would cock their great big heads when they became aware of our approach and fix us in their sights. Now what they would do is, they would actually tilt in a particular direction. The moment they would hear someone coming or see something coming, immediately they would move their great big heads and they would become aware of our approach. That means we coming closer. So they would become aware, you know, and they would fix us in their sights. As we continued to draw closer, now as we started coming closer to them, they would explode into action. What action? Speeding directly towards us. They would start chasing, they would start coming towards us like a bullet from a gun, and nearly as fast. Now you can imagine the sight. You are there in your car, you can see those large dogs coming right towards you. Imagine like a bullet from the gun, so you can imagine how fast it must be. Scary indeed. These shaggy monsters, shaggy as in having long, thick, unkempt hair or fur. They had very untidy hair. Blacker than the darkest night, they were pitch black. Usually wore bright red collars and barked furiously with massive jaws. You know, they would bark so loudly. So, I mean, you can just imagine that scene. The scene is so scary by itself when I'm reading it out to you. They were blacker than the darkest night. You can just imagine that. They were shaggy monsters, unkempt, tidy hair. They were bright red collars, and they were barking too loudly with real big jaws. They were completely fearless of our vehicle. They were coming literally towards our vehicle. Our vehicle is also moving. They are coming from that side. They are not bothering. They are not scared of the vehicle. Shooting straight into our path. They were coming right into our path, causing Citan to brake and swerve. Citan had to put the brake. Those dogs were not ready to stop. They were not ready to move out of the way. Citan had to give a brake and he had to swerve, as in he had to change the direction abruptly. Suddenly he just had to go across, because otherwise he would be over them or the dogs would be over there. God knows what would have happened. So he had to suddenly change the direction. The dog would make chase for 100 meters or so before easing off. For 100 meters, he would give a good chase, having seen us off the property. Now, finally, when we would go off that property, off that land, then they would stop chasing us. That is how these dogs were. It wasn't difficult to understand why ferocious Tibetan Mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs, brought along the Silk Road in ancient times as tribute from Tibet. Now, after looking at this, he realizes, he says, no wonder these ferocious Tibetan Mastiffs, these dogs, they actually became very popular in China's imperial courts. They used to have those hunting dogs, you know, for that, as hunting dogs. And these dogs were brought how? Those days it was not that easy, you know, that they used to use this route, this Silk Road, you know, which was a connection between Asia and Europe. So on that road, now that route by itself, I think is approx more than 7,000 kilometers. It's a huge route, you know. So they were brought along that route in ancient times as tribute from Tibet, as a payment made to a ruler as a sign of dependence. It was as a tribute from Tibet it used to come. So they used to be, you know, brought by the same road. That is how it used to be in the ancient times. By now we could see snow-capped mountains gathering on the horizon. Now as we started speeding further, gradually now we could see some mountains there at the horizon, and they were all snow-capped. You could see those snow mountains. We entered a valley where the river was wide and mostly clogged. Clogged as in it was blocked with an accumulation of something. That river was blocked with ice. It was clogged with ice, brilliant white and glinting in the sunshine. Glinting as in it was reflecting light. So with the sunshine, that light was getting reflected. So finally they came to see, they saw a river which was actually, you know, clogged with ice. It was literally blocked with an accumulation of ice. The trail hugged its bank. It was the whole trail with the bank it went, twisting with the meanders as we gradually gained height and the valley sides closed in. So what is the description here is, they say the trail hugged its bank. It was going through along with the bank, twisting with the meanders. Meanders as in winding curve or bend of a river or a road. As it bent, so did the water. And we gradually gained height. We gradually started going up. We gained the height and the valley sides closed in. Now that came to a close and we started going much higher. The turns became sharper and the ride bumpier. Now as they were moving towards the mountain, towards Mount Kailash, now they were coming across different types of lands. Now the land that they were coming across was, the turns had become way sharper. They were very steep and the ride had become more bumpier. There were more rock. It was a very rocky terrain. Citan now in third gear as we continued to climb. The track moved away from the icy river, laboring through steeper slopes that sported big rocks, daubed with patches of bright orange lichen. In the sense, now the track that they were moving, the route that they were moving on, it moved away from that river. It was off that track. Now it was, going through, it was laboring through steeper slopes and spotted big rocks daubed with patches. It was, daubed is spread on a surface in a careless or a clumsy way. So yeah, those slopes that were spotted, they actually went across those, steeper slopes. It had big rocks which were very clumsily over there. All kinds of rocks were there with patches of bright orange lichen. Lichen is a slow growing plant that forms a leaf like or branching growth. It is a very different type of a plant. So they had those patches of bright orange lichen. Now as they were going through this, beneath the rocks, hunks of snow clung on in the near permanent shade. Now beneath the rocks, below those rocks, you could see hunks of snow as in large pieces of snow clung on in the near permanent shade. There was total permanent shade. It was always shady, that area, because of the rock. So it was always there. It was like a permanent shade. I felt the pressure building up in my ears, held my nose, snorted and cleared them. Now, you remember when you take off in a plane, what happens? You all have traveled, haven't we? So, when you take off, suddenly you can feel the pressure in your ears, right? Now, here as he was going up higher and higher, he felt the same. Yeah, he felt the same. So, what did he do? He held the nose and he snorted. When you do that, you can feel the thing coming in, towards your ears. So, when you hold your nose and you do that, this thing will come. Right? So, and he cleared that pressure thing. We struggled round another tight bend and Citan stopped. Now, another bend of the mountain was very, very tight. Okay? So, Citan had to stop there. He had opened his door and jumped out of his seat before I realized what was going on. But suddenly he stopped. Quickly he opened his door and he got out. And till then he did not know what was actually happening. He said, "Snow," said Daniel, as he too exited the vehicle. Even he got out of the vehicle and he said, "There's snow," letting in a breath of cold air as he did so. So the moment he opened the door, there was, cold air coming in as soon as he opened the door. Even he got out of the car, Daniel. A swath of the white stuff lay across the track in front of us. Swath as in a broad strip of snow. Now in front of us, the whole track was filled with snow, stretching for maybe 15 meters. Right till where we could see, it was more than that, 15 meters, before it petered out and the dirt trail reappeared. Petered out as in before it faded out gradually. We could not see any longer. Till where we could see there is snow, and then gradually it just faded away. And it petered out and the dirt trail reappeared. Now before that muddy road, that dirty road could come again, till then 15 meters was this road where we had all snow on it. The snow continued on either side of us, smoothing the abrupt bank on the upslope side. Now what happened as they were moving? Now see, he is trying to explain his entire journey. It was not definitely an easy one to go up there, right? So he is explaining this to us, telling how actually he faced, how did he fight those challenges and how did he make it to the top, right? So it's really interesting. Let's just keep visualizing while we are listening, yeah? So, the snow continued on either side, on both sides of us, smoothing the abrupt bank. Abrupt as in the sudden or the unexpected bank on the upslope side, situated on the higher point. Now, the bank was too steep for our vehicle to scale. Now, that bank was so steep, it was so difficult. It was difficult for our vehicle to climb over that. It was not possible to go over that. So, there was no way round the snow patch. Now, on the other side of the snow was this bank, and that turn was so steep, they definitely couldn't go across it. So, there was no way round the snow patch. They had to go from the snow patch. There was no way that they could go from the sides. I joined Daniel as Citan stepped onto the encrusted snow and began to slither and slide forward, stamping his foot from time to time to ascertain how sturdy it was. Now what he started doing was, now Citan got down, like being the driver, being that place he knows, he got down and that snow was all there. Now he went on, very heavily putting his feet on the ground to make sure that how sturdy, how strong is that snow. I mean, if it just breaks open and they just, get in there, was it something like this? He wanted to make sure. I looked at my wristwatch. We were at 5,210 meters above the sea level. Now this is where he realized that we are 5,210 meters above sea level. The snow didn't look too deep to me. Now the snow that we could see in front of us didn't really look very deep, but the danger wasn't its depth. Daniel said, so much as its icy top layer. He's saying the depth is not risky, but that icy top layer, that is where the problem is. If we slip off, the car could turn over, he suggested, as we saw Citan grab handfuls of dirt and fling them across the frozen surface. Now what he started doing, Citan, he said, now, that icy surface was risky, just like Daniel mentioned. So what Citan did was he took a lot of dirt, he took handfuls of dirt and he started putting on that icy surface. He tried to cover it with dirt. We both pitched in, both of us, Daniel and I, also the narrator himself, we also pitched in, we also helped him when the snow was spread with soil. Now that entire snow where we could go through, it was covered with soil. Daniel and I stayed out of the vehicle to lighten Citan's load. He says, obviously we did not get into the car because then the load would be heavier on the car. So we stayed out of the vehicle, we did not get into the car, and Citan definitely rode, he drove through. He backed up and drove towards the dirty snow. Why dirty snow? You remember they put a lot of dirt on the snow. Eased the car onto its icy surface and slowly drove its length without apparent difficulty, without clearly visible or understood. It very easily, very smoothly, he drove it through that icy surface. So this was one of the other challenges that they faced. 10 minutes later, we stopped at another blockage. Now you see there are a lot of blockages, a lot of challenges that you have to face. But really you have to be really very smart and very challenging to do this. So 10 minutes later, we stopped at another blockage. Not good, sir, Citan announced as he jumped out again to survey the scene. He says, now this is not good. So again he got out of the car to see what was the problem. This time he decided to try and drive round the snow. Now he said, now let's not do that same thing again. Now let me try driving round the snow. The slope was steep and studded with major rocks, but somehow Citan negotiated them, his four-wheel drive vehicle lurching from one obstacle to the next. Very smart driver, very daring person, I must say. What a lot of guts, very gutsy character. What he did was, the slope was very steep, right? It was studded with major rocks. It was literally covered with a lot of rocks. But somehow, Citan negotiated them. He somehow went through them. His four-wheel drive vehicle lurching as in making an abrupt or unsteady or a controlled movement, going, stopping types. And from one obstacle to the next, he had those abrupt movements of the vehicle. In so doing, he cut off one of the hairpin bends, regaining the trail further up where the snow had not drifted. While he was doing so, in so doing, he cut off one of the hairpin bends. Now the bend was just like, as a hairpin. Regaining the trail, he went back on the road further up where the snow had not drifted, carried slowly by a current of air or water. Now he gradually he went across that hairpin, bend, and he finally got onto the road. He regained the trail further where there was no snow. The snow had not reached there. It had not been drifted over there. I checked my watch again as we continued to climb in the bright sunshine. They continue. Now there was bright sunshine. You remember they had left early in the morning. Yes. And so now we crept past 5,400 meters and my head began to throb horribly. Now they had come across 5,400 meters above the sea level. Right now his head was feeling pain, with regular beats. You get those headache pangs. His head was beating that bad. I took gulps from my water bottle. He drank a little water, which is supposed to help a rapid ascent. That little water he kept drinking, and that helped him to a rapid climb or a walk. He gradually started doing that. When he drank water, he was all okay with it. We finally reached the top of the pass at 5,515 meters. It was marked by a large cairn of rocks festooned with white silk scarves and ragged prayer flags. Finally, eventually, after fighting all the challenges, after overcoming all the challenges, they reached the top of the pass at 5,515 meters. Now, how was that place there? It was marked by a large cairn as in a pile of stones, especially where someone is buried. There was, you have it placed in such a manner where someone is buried. Festooned as in decorated with white silk scarves and ragged prayer flags. Prayer flags are, they are used to promote peace, compassion, strength and wisdom. These are the prayer flags. So all these things they could see over there. We all took a turn round the cairn in a clockwise direction as is in the tradition, and Sitan checked the tires on his vehicle. They went round it. Like it's always the case. When you have a deity, you have an idol, you have a temple. We go round the temple in a clockwise direction, maybe thrice. Yes. So this is how they did. They took a turn, all of them, round it, and it went in a clockwise direction as per the tradition. And then Sitan checked the tires. You remember the pressure of the tires need to be, very according to the road, right? So when you remember, if you have to go on sandy deserts, you have to make sure that your tire is not, does not have full air. You have to make it half. I don't know if you people have been to Dubai and you have been to the, desert out there. That safari, when you go there, they literally remove the air from the tires so that it doesn't fall off. So this is what they did. He checked the tires on his vehicle. He stopped at the petrol tank and partially unscrewed the top, which emitted a loud hiss. He removed the air, a loud hiss. When you open that sound, it comes, the air comes out. The lower atmospheric pressure was allowing the fuel to expand. Now, because the atmospheric pressure was very low, the fuel was expanding. It sounded dangerous to me. Maybe, sir, Sitan laughed, but no smoking. He says, yeah, it's a little dangerous, but don't worry. All that you have to take care of is don't smoke. My headache soon cleared as we careered down the other side of the pass. By then, his headache had settled. Okay, as they careered down, as in sinking the slope, they started going down the other side of the pass. It was 2 o'clock by the time we stopped for lunch. We ate hot noodles inside a long canvas tent, part of a work camp erected beside a dry salt lake. They took a lunch break. The plateau is pockmarked with salt flats and brackish lakes, vestiges of the Tethys Ocean, which bordered Tibet before the great continental collision that lifted it skyward. Now, what was the description over there? The plateau over there is pockmarked. What do you mean by pockmarked? It is covered with something, with salt flats. Salt flats as in roof covered with snow. Those were the salt flats, and brackish lakes. Brackish as in slightly salt water. It was very salty water. Vestiges of the Tethys Ocean. Vestiges as in trace of something. So it was the vestiges of the Tethys Ocean which bordered Tibet. That ocean, it bordered Tibet before the great continental collision that lifted it skyward. Skyward as in towards the sky. Now there was a great continental collision. This is how basically it was formed, right from, you can see the Gondwana, you can see the Tethys. So this is how it had it had been lifted upwards, skyward. This one was a hive of activity. Men with pickaxes and shovels trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coats and salt-encrusted boots. Now this was, this one was a hive. It was a hive as in a place with busy people. Now where they went, it was a place with busy people. Men with pickaxes and shovels, trudging back, trudging as in walking slowly or with heavy steps, usually because of exhaustion. They used to do their work and so they used to be exhausted. Trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coats and salt-encrusted boots. It was covered with something. These were the salt-encrusted boots. All wore sunglasses. Now, why did they wear sunglasses? Because it was against the glare, against the shine, coming from where? It was coming as a steady stream of blue trucks. There were a lot of blue trucks which were loaded, which were heavily loaded with piles of salt. And because of that, there was this glare coming, the sunshine falling on them, blindingly white lake laden with piles of salt. There was lots and lots of salt, and that's the reason there was this shine getting reflected, and so they had to wear the glares. They had to wear the sunglasses to protect against that. Now after that, by late afternoon, we had reached the small town of Hor, back on the main east-west highway that followed the old trade route from Lhasa to Kashmir. Now after that, as they resumed their journey, as they continued their journey, they reached the small town of Hor. Daniel, who was returning to Lhasa, now Daniel had joined them. He was supposed to, his destination was Lhasa. So he found a ride in a truck. So Sitan and I bade him farewell outside a tire repair shop. Here, Daniel stopped his journey with them and he went on a truck. He had to go somewhere else. So they bid him goodbye. Now, there were two of them left. We had suffered 2 punctures in quick succession on the drive down from the Salt Lake, and Sitan was eager to have them fixed since they left him with no spares. Now, while they were going those bumpy roads, you saw those roads were very full of rocks and stuff. So they had 2 punctures. Now, they had already replaced 2 tires. So currently, they did not have a spare one with them. So Sitan was very worried because he wanted to get these punctured tires done because they had no spares with them. Besides, the second tire he had changed had been replaced by one that was as smooth as my bald head. He said the other one which had been put up, it was literally very smooth. And how smooth? So the comparison is as smooth as the narrator's bald head. He was bald. So he said that the tire was equally, smooth as my head. Hor was a grim, miserable place. There was no vegetation whatsoever, just dust and rocks, liberally scattered with years of accumulated refuse, which was unfortunate given that the town sat on the shore of Lake Mansarovar, which was venerated stretch of water. Now, Hor actually is that miserable place. It's a very dirty place. There is no vegetation at all. It is all full of dust and rocks. Liberally scattered, liberally as in it is there in large amounts, lots of dust, lot many rocks, with years of accumulated refuse. Refuse is rubbish or rejected matter. So there were years of them, years of accumulated refuse, which was unfortunate given that the town sat on the shore of Lake Mansarovar. Now just imagine how unfortunate. Lake Mansarovar is considered so beautiful, but this surrounding was absolutely, rubbish. Tibet's most venerated stretch of water, venerated as in it is regarded with respect. Like I said, Lake Mansarovar is something which people look forward to, right? Now that's the best stretch of water which people actually pay good respect to, but it was surrounded by all the trash. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoints Mansarovar as the source of 4 great Indian rivers. And which are they? The Indus, the Ganges, the Satluj, and the Brahmaputra. Now, according to the ancient and Buddhist cosmology, cosmology is basically the science of origin and development of the universe. So, it started from there. So, in that case, according to that, they pinpoint Mansarovar as the source. This is the beginning of 4 great rivers. There's the Indian rivers, the Indus, the Ganges, the Satluj, and the Brahmaputra. They say it starts from there. That's the source, that's the origin. Actually, only the Satluj flows from the lake, from the Lake Mansarovar, but the headwaters as in the tributary stream of a river close to or forming part of its source. Now, the headwaters of the others apart from Satluj all rise nearby on the flanks of Mount Kailash. Flanks as in the right and left side of a large object or structure. So basically on the sides of Mount Kailash, they begin from there. The headwaters actually, it starts from the sides over there. We were within striking distance of the great mountain and I was eager to forge ahead. He says, we were like literally there, we were nearly there, and I somehow just wanted to rush out there. But I had to wait. Sitan told me to go and drink some tea in Hor's only cafe, which, like all the other buildings in town, was constructed from badly painted concrete and had 3 broken windows. He said, before we could go on, Sitan told me, look, do one thing, take a cup of tea, catch up on some tea in the only cafe at Hor. Hor had only this one cafe again, which was like the other buildings in town. It was badly constructed. It was constructed from badly painted concrete and it had 3 broken windows. Now that was the surrounding out there. The good view of the lake through one of them helped to compensate for the drought. Now here he says, the cafe was definitely not in a good position, but the good view from there, or from one of those, broken windows, helped to compensate. Compensate as in it had to neutralize. Now everything was dirty, but when I saw the view was amazing. It was really beautiful. So it helped to compensate for the drought, as in the current of cool air in a room or a confined space. That space where he was, it compensated for that beautiful, scenic view actually compensated for it. So he was fine. I was served by a Chinese youth in military uniform who spread the grease around on my table with a filthy rag. Filthy as in a very, very dirty rag. Rag is a torn piece of cloth, piece of old cloth, usually torn from a larger piece for cleaning things. We do tend to do it to make it small. Before bringing me a glass and a thermos of tea. So he was this Chinese youth, he was dressed in a military uniform and he really cleaned that table with really some dirty piece of cloth, and then he served him with glass and a thermos of tea. Half an hour later, now he had the cup of tea. Half an hour later, Sitan relieved me from my solitary confinement. Solitary confinement as in, alone. Solitary means I was alone. Imprisonment. Confinement as in I was sitting there all alone. So he relieved me from that by giving me company. And we drove past a lot more rocks and rubbish westwards out of town towards Mount Kailash. Again, they resumed their journey. My experience in Hor came as a stark contrast. Stark contrast as in very different. It was extremely different from what I had experienced before, and it was contrast to also the accounts of what other people had experienced. What they experienced was very different according to what I experienced. So this is what he's saying. Stark contrast to accounts I had read of earlier travelers' first encounters with Lake Mansarovar. Now, their experience is right here. What they experienced when they first witnessed, when they first saw Lake Mansarovar, what was their experience? Eikai Kawaguchi, a Chinese monk who had arrived there in 1900, was so moved by the sanctity of the lake. Sanctity as in it was, the quality of being holy or sacred. That lake, it was a very sacred lake, right? It's considered that he burst into tears. Now, this Japanese monk, when he first saw Lake Mansarovar, he was so impressed. He was actually so moved by the holy, that thing was so holy, so pious that he had tears in his eyes. A couple of years later, the hallowed waters as the honored waters, the water of respect, that lake of respect, hallowed waters had a similar effect on Sven Hedin, a Swede who wasn't prone to sentimental outbursts. Now, he also had a similar effect. He also had this similar effect. Who? Sven Hedin, a Swede, a person from Sweden. He was there and he wasn't likely to suffer from sudden feelings. He was not prone to it, right? But he had a similar experience when he watched the Lake Mansarovar for the very first time. Well, we shall take a break here and we shall continue our journey in part 2.